And then you have what Fulling Mill calls chartreuse. So if you want to tie one at home with that light green, with the light green and the chartreuse, you've got that. You have some hairy ice dub. This is from Hareline, and that's what we're going to dub our number 6 with. But like I say, I mean, I've tied a bunch of them without. And then you have one little small piece of, don't lose that little small piece of marabou. That is mini marabou that we're going to use for the small one. And that's probably backwards to you, Flip, and I don't know how to change it. Let me see. Hang on just a second. It's got a mirror image going.
It looks good.
Okay, yeah, we won't worry about it. So we're going to tie the number 6 first, and so we're going to tie one that's dubbed. And so to give you an idea of what's in it, we're going to tie the Krystal flash, and this is rainbow Krystal flash. We'll tie it in first. You could just as easily tie it in after the marabou, and the flash will be on the outside of the marabou if you want the flash to show. And then we're going to tie the marabou in, and then we'll tie the front part of the foam in, and then the only other material is the dubbing and the legs. Now this one I have, hang on just a second. This one has 2 legs on each side, but for simplicity's sake, we're just going to tie one on each side. I don't think it matters. So you still have 2 legs on each side. So we're going to tie one more like this as far as the legs go. Now there's all sorts of options here. This one is 2mm craft foam from like Walmart or Hobby Lobby. And this is 2 pieces of it, yellow and green, glued together with that 3M spray adhesive. You just spray the sheets with it, let it dry a little bit, put them together and wait them, let it dry about an hour, and you've got this laminated foam. So, all right, let's get started on the number 6. So pull out your number 6 hook and get it in your vise, like so. And I'm using 140 denier olive thread. The thread doesn't show that much, so almost anything will work fine. Start your thread, eye length or so back, and then you can just spiral it back. You don't have to make touching wraps, but let's just spiral it back to above the barb of the hook, which on this hook is about where the bend is. Now this hook is a 2X long number 6 dry fly hook. And the reason we use it is because Larry Offner gave us 500 of them. So, and it's a perfect hook for this. It's a lightweight hook. It's you can tell it's pretty flexible, but it should be plenty strong enough for bass. All right, so the first thing we're going to tie in is our Krystal flash. So take one strand, one full length strand of your Krystal flash.
What's the full length? Is that?
It's about 1 foot long. About 1 foot, roughly 1 foot. We're going to double it and cut it. And then we're going to double it a second time and cut it. So you'll wind up with 4 pieces of it. So double it, cut it, and then double it again and cut it. And that gives us 4 pieces. So I now have four strands of the rainbow Krystal flash. All right, we'll stop just a second, let everybody get cut. And your thread should be hanging about the point of the hook. And we're going to use the point and the barb for references along here. Now the way I like to tie this in, there's any number of ways to do it. I like to loop it under the hook shaft, under the shank of the hook, and pull it up and hold it straight up, a little bit of tension on my thread, and then I can just lay it back down along the hook. And I want to wrap and tie it back to about the barb, which is about the rear of our thread. So I'm tying back to above the barb, and then bring your thread back to the hook point and let it hang there. Cliff, is that you on there? The thumbnail's off the top of my screen.
Yes, sir.
All right,
How are
great.
you?
Yeah, great. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Now we want to trim the Krystal flash to roughly a hook shaft in length, so somewhere about like that. So we've had it trimmed. Chris, mine focus up here still good?
Looks good.
Good. You can see every flaw so far?
I can see.
Just the one on the right? Okay, good deal.
That's great.
4K. All right, now, marabou is next. Our marabou tail is next. And this is what I like about woolly bugger marabou versus, now, this is a regular piece of marabou, and see how long and stringy, and this is great for like big articulated streamers and other streamers and things like that. But for these small tails, woolly bugger marabou, notice how fluffy and thick it is. And you have a piece of that in your bag. Now, you can actually make 2 flies out of this. We did this a couple of months ago. If you pull about halfway, pull those fibers back to where they don't get trapped, you can actually save the back of the feather, double those over, and make another tail out of them. So we're going to pull those back, and we want a tail that is about the big one. Yeah, not the chartreuse one, but the olive one this thick. We want a tail that's about the same length as our hook shank, which is also the same length as our Krystal flash. So
How are you pulling that off?
I just kind of separated it. Just now, if you don't want to save it for a second copy of your fly, see, I just pulled it back like that. I'm just holding it back out of the way. I can actually, I'll tell you what I can do, Mike, to make it easier. I'm just going to cut it off, and I'll save that for another fly. All right, so I've got this little piece, and I want to lay it down to where I am about the same length as my flash. Take a couple of loose wraps and then tighter wraps. And the easiest way to tie marabou is to kind of keep it in a bunch and pull it towards you. Notice I'm pulling the marabou towards me and making touching wraps all the way back to the barb, and then I go back to the hook point again. And to trim off the tag end, pull it up and twist it into a little post and trim it off. All right, at this point, wrap your thread forward all the way to where we started our thread, about a hook eye length behind the eye in the front. Do what? Yeah, my flash is kind of going down toward the bottom. And if you're really anal about your marabou being all the way around the hook shaft, you can take your thumb and twist it around the hook shaft if you want. I am not, so. Now, Flip, if there's anything you do different, chime in and let us know, so. Unless it's too many different things.
Looks good.
All right, so here, let's take you have a dark green piece of foam. And I just cut all these on a paper cutter. This is Walmart craft foam, and it's about 2 millimeters. And whatever size hook you use, you want the foam to be about the width of the hook gap. This is a little bit wider, but that's fine, doesn't matter. So you want your foam to be about the same width as the gap of the hook you're using. So we want to take our scissors and about 3/8 of an inch, you know, somewhere along there, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch back, punch a hole, push your scissors point through the foam and make a hole in the foam. And then stick that piece of foam over the eye of the hook. And you can see this is going to be our bottom lip. So now, let's make that bottom lip. Lay the foam back along the hook shank, hold it, and just kind of hold it. You can push it in with your fingers. I'm just pushing it in and holding it. Make a couple of loose wraps. And then tighten down on those loose wraps. And you can see it twist all over the place. So just kind of move it around to where you want it, where it's centered under the, whoop. And it's going to twist. You could put super glue, I guess, on the shaft, but I don't like to fool with super glue.
2 wraps and then tighten it?
2 wraps and tighten it, and then make a few more tight wraps to really kind of cinch it down. And it's going to twist on the hook, so you just have to adjust it off and on. Now, once you have that front tied in, pinch, I'm going to go to the top, pinch the foam down on each side of the hook shank with your finger. And what we're going to do is spiral back about 1/8 of an inch, somewhere along about there over the top, and make a segment. So it makes a little segment. And again, it's going to twist on you, so just straighten it back out. And just make 3 or 4 wraps, doesn't have to be many, and make the first segment. Theoretically, these are the same size segments, but mine never work out to be the same size, so it's okay. And let's spiral back again one more time to roughly the middle of our hook and make another segment. Now this segment is going to be a little bit different, and I don't know, Flip, I don't know if you do this, but this is going to be our tying point for our legs. So I like it, you notice that if I left it like it is, that's just a little crack is all that is. So that means those legs are going to be folded right together when I tie them in there. So I like to just take your thread and make a little flat spot there. It doesn't have to be much, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, kind of like that. And that way when we tie our legs in, they won't just fold together. They'll stay spread out just a bit.
Bill, you know, doesn't really matter which way you do it, but I just put my legs, I lay 2 legs across the top, about where your first segment is, and I just make cross wraps over.
Cross wraps on them, yeah.
That's all I do.
Yeah, I looked at the picture of that one. It kind of looked like that was the way you've done it, but yeah, I'm never good at cross wrapping legs, so I've done it, but that's why I'm triangle bugs and I don't get along. All right, let's do another segment. And these look nice. I hate to cover them up with dubbing, but we're going to. And then we come back one more time for our final segment about that over the hook barb. And actually, I'm kind of between the hook barb and the hook point, but just let it anywhere in there is fine. Now, if you were not going to use dubbing here, you would just move your thread back to your first segment, back to the middle, tie your legs in, move your thread forward, tie off, and you're finished. But we're going to dub it. So you have some of this olive hairy ice dub. So this will add a little bit of flash to it. And we're going to dub up to the point where we tie our legs in. We're not going to dub over that little middle flat section yet. So just make you about a 2-inch long dubbing noodle. And we have that nice little groove to start our dubbing in. And you can make it as bushy or as flat as you like. Yeah, about a 2-inch noodle should take you pretty close to our leg tie-in point. And I'm just going to trim some of those wild hairs off, but that's roughly what we have. Now, we're going to tie in one leg on each side, which will in fact give us one piece of rubber, so it'll in effect give us two legs. So take one of your full-length centipede legs, fold it, cut it in half. Lay one piece aside, because we'll only use one piece. So you have one roughly 4-inch long piece, and fold it and cut it again. Fold it in half and cut it. So now we have two pieces about 1 3/4 long or so. Okay. I'm going to move my thread, make sure it's about the middle of that little flat spot we created. And the easiest way I found to tie these legs in is push the leg against your thread. Just grab, push it against the thread and just basically,
Did you say cut this in half?
yeah, cut that one in half. So push the leg against your thread and then just bring it under the thread all the way to the near side, and it's there. Just like that. Did y'all see that? Need me to do again?
Put it on the far side or near side?
Okay, near side. Okay, so I'm putting the threads hanging on the far side, so I'm pushing my leg against it, and then just pulling my leg up with the thread. The thread holds it for me until it gets to the near side, and I'll let go, and then give it a few wraps, and that leg is tied in. And you can position it up and down wherever you like. Yep, it'll still move. And notice how the legs, since we created that little flat spot, they splay out a little bit. They don't lay close together.
How many times did you cut those legs?
Cut it in half twice. I cut it in half and then put one of those pieces aside and then folded the other one and cut it in half. Yeah. As Flip said, this is a quick fly to tie. When you kind of get used to tying it, you can crank them out in 4 or 5 minutes each, particularly without the dubbing. All right, next, our other piece of leg, we do the same way. We push it against our thread, but we don't bring it, of course, to the near side. We just let it hang on the far side and give it a couple of wraps. And we have sort of an X with our legs, or not. It doesn't matter. Once they get in the water, they're going to move all around anyway. All right, we'll stop for a second, let everybody get their legs on. Legs on, legs on. Are you tied? I've got a vise over here. Sure, okay. Okay, now let's take some of our dubbing again, and you have enough of this dubbing to dub at least 2 flies, at least. So let's again make about a 2-inch dubbing noodle, as we call it. Just kind of twist it on your thread. It's better to have too little dubbing than too much. But here we're going to wrap between our legs, so we want at least 2 inches. All right. So I'm going to wrap between my legs, one full wrap between the legs. And then I'll hold the front 2 legs back and then start going forward with my dubbing. I say I don't quite have enough, which is fine. So I'm going to grab a little bit more. And notice that front dubbing, push my legs back a little bit, but that's just fine. And just keep adding just a little bit dubbing at each time until you get to the front.
So it's gonna come all the way to the front.
Yep, come all the way to behind that lip you tied in earlier. And so you're left with something that looks roughly like that. And we're almost finished. This dubbing, you kind of have to give it a lot of swirls on the thread. And if you have dubbing wax, it'll help it lay down a little bit. But I think the bushiness of it's probably one of the attractor pieces of it. Uh-huh. But I've tried chapstick for dubbing wax, but I've never tried dubbing wax for chapstick.
Never do it twice.
I can't do it.
Just do that. Well,
I put it on my fingers,
yeah,
just to get a better grip on the.
uh-huh. All right, so let's take our piece of foam we have and pull it forward over the top. Now, you can pull it fairly tight if you want, but I like to leave a little hump on it. Depending on how wide your foam is and how the size of your hook, if you pull it too tight, it can push the legs down. And I'll show you one where that, like this one. See how the legs were pushed down on this? I pull the foam too tight. So that's the only thing you need to guard against. So pull it forward, and then just like you did at first, make a couple of loose wraps, tighten them down, and then make 4 or 5 tighter wraps.
Is there one called a little humpy?
There's a humpy. Yeah, it's tied with elk hair and thread, and it's a dry fly. Elk hair and floss. Now, depending on how long your first lip, mine's about the right length. It's about how long I want it. So I'm just going to fold those together and trim them to about the same length.
And you cinch that down pretty tight?
Yeah, you cinch it down pretty tight. You want it. And see, I probably pull my foam a little bit too tight because my legs, there we go. Kind of. Now, then I like to hold them together and just do a little dog ear on each corner. You don't have to do that, but I think it makes it look better. Do a little dog ear on each corner to kind of round it. And then you whip finish or half hitch, but whip finishing is probably better here than a half hitch, over that point behind the eye. So you whip finish right over your final tie-in point. And I like to put 2 whip finishes on it because I generally don't put head cement on these. And the final thing is just to trim your legs. And that's kind of personal preference, how long you like the legs. Some people like long legs, some like shorter. I'm going to trim these back ones just a bit. You can always trim them off if they foul whenever you're fishing. If they foul in the hook gap, you can always use your nippers and trim them off. And that is it. As Flip said, a heck of a lot easier to tie than a hard body popper is generally. Now, it doesn't make any difference to the fish, but, you know, it looks a lot better, I think, if we have a few spots. So I'm just touching it with the tip of a Sharpie. So touch it with the tip of a Sharpie, and I think I'm Kirk Dietrich painting popper bodies. There we go. And you can see with that lip, that double lip, it's going to give a pretty good popping action in the water. Now, Flip, have you ever found the need to put UV on the lip to kind of hold it a little firmer? I can't hear you, Flip.
I use the Gorilla Glue, super glue,
Uh-huh.
the brush on, and I take a fine bodkin, and I just put a little bit on top of those thread wraps,
Uh-huh.
and then I push from the front to open the lips, the way I like them,
Yeah.
and I'll hold it there a second, and it's good to go. That's what I did on the ones I tied. Well, the one in that picture I sent you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed it had something on it. I didn't know if it was UV, but that's Gorilla Glue. Is that the gel or the regular?
The gel.
The gel, okay.
It's the brush on gel.
Did y'all hear that? He brushes the gel on, thread wraps, and then brushes forward over the front to kind of hold it a little steadier.
Yeah.
But it'll fish just fine like it is.
Good.
Just any twist, Gorilla Glue, just brushes, Gorilla Glue over the whole thing of it?
No, not the whole thing, just this front part here, I think. Isn't that right, Flip? Just the front? From the
Just over the thread wraps.
Okay,
and then he holds this, and that kind of,
yeah,
mhm.
okay.
Now, Flip, do you use the Krystal flash in yours?
Yeah, on the tail.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I actually use the midge flash.
The smaller midge flash, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Everybody successful there? Looks good. Yep, I can, yeah. All right, good, Cliff. All right.
I got a question, Bill, when we double the foam, like the double laminated, what size hook you going up to?
That's a 6. That's the same hook.
Okay.
And it's got plenty of hook gap because this one's not dubbed, you notice, and the difference between the dubbing does take up some of the hook gap, but I mean I think that's a nice looking underbody, really. And it doesn't have the flash that the dubbing has, but it's
Well, it's got emotional legs.
Mm-hmm. yeah. So if you find the single foam doesn't float well enough, whatever hook size you're using, you can certainly double it like I did in that one. All right. Now we're going to put our dubbing aside because we won't use it on the next one. We're going to tie one of the small ones. And this is actually a must-have nymph hook and number 10, but it's a small number 10. This is if I were going to buy a hook for this fly, this is a number 12. Notice it is identically the same size. This is a number 12 TMC dry fly hook. Now, TMCs are kind of expensive. I don't generally buy them. I've had these for years. But a lot of people, a standard dry fly hook would be a really good hook for this because, one, it floats well because the hook's so light. And this is a barbed hook. Flip ties on that fire hole sticks. You said it's 618 or 718, Flip? I can't hear it. Flip, you're off again.
718.
718, yeah, okay. All right, we're going to start this one the same way. We're going to start about an eye length back. And we're going to wrap back to the barb. And we're going to tie it exactly the same procedure, except we're not going to use any dubbing. So wrap back to the barb and then move back to just in front of the point. And you certainly don't need a full length of this Krystal flash for this, but just to make it consistent for all of us, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take one length of our Krystal flash and double it. And the longer strands are easier to hold. Then I'm going to double it again. So I double it and cut it, and then double it again and cut it. So I'm back to the same 4 strands that I had before. And I don't know if y'all heard Flip, he said he uses the midge flash on this, which is the same stuff except about half the diameter of this. I'm going to take these, wrap them, put them together and wrap them under the shank of my hook.
How many strands do you have right there?
There's 4 pieces, and when I double them under the hook, it makes 8 strands. Yep. So I have it under the hook, in front of my thread. And see, I'm holding my thread tight, and yep, in front of the thread, and that thread keeps it from sliding back on me. If I keep my tension on my thread, all I have to do is just lay the flash down flat and start turning my thread. And tie it down just back to the barb where we were before, and then move back forward. And while you have it in your hand, go ahead and trim it to the length of the hook. Now, if you like a longer tail, make a longer tail. I mean, these lengths are all just subjective. They're not, nothing's written in stone here. You can do you on this fly, whatever you want to do. Now, you have a piece of this mini marabou. You certainly don't have, I just had some mini marabou. I could very easily take this piece of woolly booger marabou I used earlier and just use one side of this and make a tail. It would work just fine. I happen to have some of this mini marabou, and so you have a piece of it in your bag. Now, if it's too stringy on the ends, and what I mean by that, if it's got too many of these long fibers on the ends, just pick them off with your thumbnail. See, I've got some sticking off to the side, so I'm just going to pick those off. And again, just the same length as our flash, roughly. Tie it in.
That's the mini marabou.
That's the mini marabou, yeah. I've pretty much quit buying this. I used to use this stuff a lot for small flies, but since I started using the woolly booger marabou, I can just pick pieces of it off, and because the mini marabou is pretty poor quality in general. It's not that many usable feathers in a package. All right, so I've got roughly, I'm going to pick some of those off with my thumb. All right, that's roughly a hook shank in length. So it's tied at the point, wrap back to the barb, right back to the barb, and then bring your thread back to the point and let it hang there. Pull that up and twist it. Pull the tag end up and twist it and cut it off. And once you've trimmed the waist end off, take your thread back to just behind the hook eye. All right, let's talk. You have a small piece of olive foam that's about 1/4 of an inch wide in your bag. And notice it's cut, just like I mentioned earlier, it's cut to roughly the gap of the hook, width of the gap of the hook.
The double one or the single fly?
Do you have a thick one and a thin one?
Yeah.
Okay, use the thicker one.
Thick one?
Yep. Now, don't tie it in yet. What this stuff is razor foam. And it comes 4 pieces in a pack. And it comes 2 pieces of 1 millimeter, which is this, and then 2 pieces of 0.5 millimeter, which is this super thin foam. So if you're tying, Flip, use the 1 millimeter tying down to your 16s and 14s and stuff, is that right? I think Flip signed off, but yes, he uses the 1 millimeter for the like 14s and 16s. You could even use the 0.5 if you wanted to. But what I've done here for this size 12, I've actually taken these two and glued them together. So you'll notice this slightly thicker piece is laminated. It's a piece of the half millimeter and 1 millimeter. Laminated with the 3M spray adhesive. So just like we did before, on this, 1/4 of an inch or maybe a little more, make a hole in it with your scissors point in the center of it and push it over the hook eye. Okay, got it. And again, just like we did before, just hold it, pinch it down on each side of the hook to hold it steady. Give it a couple of loose wraps and tighten them down. And then make 3 or 4 or 5 tighter wraps. All right, now we're going to make our segments. I want to go back. I'm going to turn this up to the top so you can see it. I want to go take my thread diagonally over the top, about 1/8 of an inch back, pinching the foam down on each side, and make a segment. Then I'm going to go do the same thing again and make a second segment. And remember, this is my leg tying point. Now, Flip ties his legs in at this point. We're going to do ours here in the middle just because that's the way I've done it, but either way is fine. And remember, I like to make a little flat spot here for the legs. So we make our little flat spot. That's only not even 1/16 of an inch. And then we're going to make another segment.
You advance back to the leg spot.
Yeah, and see, right now I'm about the point. So what you want to pull your foam forward and make sure you're wrapped far enough back. See, I'm not quite wrapped far enough back. When I pull my foam forward, you can still see some of my thread wraps. I want to go back and make one more segment. It can be a narrower segment. Like that. Test it. Yep, that's about right. See, none of my thread wraps are visible. You don't. I mean, it's fine if you don't, Carlton. It depends on how big you make these others. Now, take your thread once over the top again and go, let's move it forward. Move it to that segment, to our first segment, and let's move it forward to our leg tying point.
And who says you can't do cross wraps?
With legs, I can't do cross wraps. They roll all over the place. So, with your thread hanging in the middle of our little flat spot we have there, in the middle, in the center, we have a 4-inch piece left over from that previous fly. Let's fold it in half and cut it. Now these are regular medium rubber legs. For these small sizes, you could certainly use like the midge size leg. Now again, I'll push it against my thread. Push it against the thread. Whoops, grab both ends of it. Bring it to the near side of the hook, roughly on the center. We can still adjust it. Give it a few wraps. Okay. Then take our other piece, push it against the thread, and move it to the far side of the hook. All right, so now we have our X. And since we're not dubbing, we're ready to move our thread all the way to behind the hook eye. So I'll hold my legs back out of the way, cross wrap over my next segment to the middle, cross wrap over that one, next segment, and now I'm left behind the hook eye. When I tie these to fish, this is the way I'm gonna do like Flip. I'll skip the dubbing mostly. You could certainly put dry fly dubbing on this if you want. Bring your body over. Hold your legs back. Couple of loose wraps, tighten. And 3 or 4 more wraps and tighten. And we're almost finished. Other than trimming the head and the legs and whip finish, we're done.
Yeah, what was this flash called?
Krystal Flash Rainbow. So I'm going to fold my two together and cut them. Yeah, it looks about right. And dog ear a little bit if you want. And again, then whip finish the front. And I'm going to do 2 whip finishes on this. And trim your legs to whatever length you like. Generally, legs about a hook shank long work pretty well and don't foul as badly in the bend of the hook. And I'm going to use my Sharpie and just touch with the tip of the Sharpie. And there you have it. You have one more size 6 hook, but if you have at home a size 10 or 12 nymph hook, you can use that other small piece of foam. You've got enough materials to tie at least another copy of each size.
If you go too far back with that segment, bottom segment, it'll make the tail go down.
Yep.
But it didn't on these, but I know before I've done these foam flies, I have just get
To
too
go
far back in the bend,
in the
and
bend.
the tail
Drops it down.
drop.
You know, but in the water, it's going to fluff up
Yeah.
anyway. So
It looks better this way than all that.
yeah. Yeah, and you see we've got that nice little segmented body on the bottom, and that's really once you get rolling with this, you can turn them out.
So I guess the advantage of the glue initially is to keep it from rolling when you, I mean, the chuggers are noble, It's got enough on it where it doesn't, but
Uh-huh.
that 4 or 5 bluegill on that one, it'll turn upside down.
Yeah.
It'll probably roll all the way over.
Yep.
So this single,
You could tie it like on a number 12 hook or something, it'll be fine. These are number 12, and they're the 1 millimeter, and they float just fine, just not quite as high as this does. They kind of float down in the surface, you know how some foam poppers kind of float in the surface, that's kind of like what they'll float. Yeah. But yeah, so that is the Hot Lips Gurgler. It seems like the lip ought to be red, calling it a Hot Lips Gurgler. But,
Yes, it could be. Every popping bug you paint's got a red mouth.
yeah, and I actually saw a guy on the internet that did this, and when he dubbed his, the front part of his dubbing, he dubbed with a bright red dubbing up here. I don't know if that makes any difference, but if you double the foam, like this one, you could certainly use red foam in the middle if you wanted to. Because the Walmart pack of foam is about 6 inches thick, and it's got every color from black, pink, greens, chartreuse, white, cream, tan. A lot of colors you don't want to use.
That's a lot cheaper than popping bugs.
Uh-huh.
See, that bluegill bug don't have them no more.
Now, these are easy to, this is easy to laminate this stuff. Lowe's sells that, it's a big can of 3M spray adhesive. Another thing, Hobby Lobby, I think it was Hobby Lobby I saw, they had some visors, foam visors that are like $2 or whatever, and they're a thicker foam. They're made out of a thicker, not 2 millimeter, it's thicker than that, probably 3 millimeter. If you don't want to bother with glue in it, but I kind of like the two-tone on this glued stuff here. So.
You can get those individual sheet colors,
Yeah.
sheets maybe for.
Yeah, this is Hairlines, and it's not that expensive, and there's a lot of fly. I mean, there's probably 20 or 25 flies.
I'm talking about Hobby Lobby.
Hobby Lobby. Oh yeah, you get the it's like the size of typing paper, kind of.
Some of it's got a sticky back on it.
It does. You don't want that. Some of it's got glitter back on it. Some of it's got sticky back. But yeah, it's.
Get sticky back good, good sticky together.
Yeah, I think the foam I got was from Walmart. I think I got the package from Walmart. Well, that is, Cliff, that one came out okay for you? I don't have your thumbnail, so I can't see. All right, good. Glad you joined us tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Great time.
yep, great. All right, I'm gonna sign off, man. Good to see you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, man.
that little one's good for brim?
I think so, don't you? Oh, you'll catch brim on this big one. That size 6.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Good size brim, like chinky pin and stuff, that's what, yeah, go try them out there.
You gotta test out the product right there.
Yep.
That's what you gotta do, test out the product.
All right, y'all, thank you for coming. That's, like I said, it's a fun little fly to tie. It's quick and easy. You got it on you got your pond, you ready to go? You got 2?
Actually, they worked yesterday morning.
And on the email I sent out, if you didn't read it, I put a copy of the instructions, written instructions on the email. Yeah.
That's a good new thing to do.